The city lights always seemed brighter from the tall glass windows of the office tower. Cars rushed below like restless ants, horns echoing through the streets, and people hurried with sharp looks on their faces. In one of those offices, a woman known as the Ice Queen ruled with her voice, her pen, and her piercing eyes. Her name was Clara, and she carried the reputation of being untouchable, unshaken, and unbroken. But this story was not about her. It was about her daughter, Myra. Myra grew up in the shadow of her mother's icy reputation. People whispered about Clara's coldness in boardrooms, but they also whispered about Myra's life. They expected the daughter of the Ice Queen to be strong, confident, and brilliant. Myra was only 17, but her world was already mapped out by other people. A perfect education, a perfect future in finance, a perfect life that matched her mother's image. From the outside, her life looked like a dream. She studied in one of the best schools in New York. She wore neat clothes pressed every morning by house staff. She had cars waiting to take her anywhere she wanted to go. But on the inside, Myra felt like she lived in a glass cage. Every morning began the same way. Clara sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through stock reports while drinking black coffee. Myra would sit across from her, with a neat plate of fruit and toast she barely touched. Silence filled the room, a silence that weighed heavier than words. If Myra tried to speak, her mother's sharp eyes rose from the paper. "Eat. You'll need energy to focus." That was all. No smile. No warmth. Only instructions. Myra wanted to ask her mother simple things. She wanted to ask if she ever got scared. She wanted to ask if she ever felt tired. But questions like that never had space in their world. At school, Myra walked the hallways like a statue. Other students admired her, some even envied her. They thought she was lucky. They thought she was untouchable. But no one saw the shaking in her hands when she opened a test paper. No one saw the nights she stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why her chest felt so heavy. Her teachers expected her to be top of the class. Her mother expected her to lead every project. The world expected her to shine. But Myra did not know how to tell anyone that she felt like she was drowning. One evening, after school, Myra sat in the back seat of the car while the driver took her home. The city blurred past the window, neon lights, busy streets, strangers laughing in small groups. She pressed her forehead against the glass and whispered to herself, "I don't belong anywhere." Her chest ached as if a hand was pressing hard against it. She closed her eyes and tried to hold back tears. Crying was weakness. Her mother hated weakness. Myra had learned that since she was small. When she was 10, she had cried after a piano recital because she made a mistake. Clara had crouched down to her level, not to comfort, but to command. Never show the world your cracks. They will use them against you. Control yourself. Myra had wiped her tears quickly, nodding even though she wanted a hug. Since that day, she promised herself she would never cry in front of her mother again. But promises made to hide pain are the hardest to keep. That night, Myra lay in her expensive bedroom. The room was wide, painted white with gold accents, the bed covered in soft blankets. Everything looked beautiful, but it felt cold. She stared at the ceiling until her vision blurred with unshed tears. Her chest rose and fell too fast, and she pressed her hands against it. "I can't breathe," she whispered to herself. But no one heard. Myra wanted someone, not a teacher, not a tutor, not a driver, not a servant. Someone who would see her, not the Ice Queen's daughter. Someone who would not tell her to be strong, but tell her it was okay to be weak. She did not know that life was preparing such a meeting for her. A meeting that would come not in a shining office tower, but in the most unexpected place. For now, she closed her eyes, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks, hidden even from the night. The weight of perfection pressed heavy on her heart. She did not yet know that soon, everything would begin to change. The next morning began like every other morning. The alarm rang at 6, soft classical music filling the room. Myra opened her eyes, but her body felt heavy, as if someone had placed stones on her chest. She wanted to stay in bed, to hide under the blanket, but she knew she couldn't. She dressed neatly in her school uniform, brushed her hair until it shone, and walked downstairs. As always, Clara sat at the long dining table with her tablet in one hand and her coffee in the other. Her sharp eyes scanned numbers on the screen as though they were more alive than people. Myra sat across from her, the same plate of fruit waiting on the table. She pushed a grape around her plate with her fork. "Eat," Clara said without looking up. Myra placed the grape in her mouth, chewing slowly. The silence stretched between them like glass that could shatter at any second. After breakfast, the driver took her to school. Outside, the streets buzzed with life shopkeepers opening doors, children laughing as they chased each other, workers rushing with bags in hand. Myra watched from inside the car, separated by tinted windows. She felt like she lived in a different world, one where laughter was not allowed. At school, Myra's teachers praised her for her work. "Excellent, Myra." "Just like always," one of them said when handing back a test paper with a perfect score. Her classmates admired her. Some even whispered, "She's the Ice Queen's daughter, of course she's perfect." But Myra knew the truth. The smile she gave in return was only a mask. Her hands trembled under the desk. Her stomach twisted with worry every time she thought about the next exam, the next presentation, the next expectation. At lunch, she sat alone. People wanted to be near her, but no one wanted to truly know her. They saw a crown on her head, not the cracks in her heart. When the final bell rang, Myra's shoulders felt like they carried the weight of the entire school. She walked to the car, but instead of sitting inside right away, she stopped and looked around. The air outside smelled of fried food from a small cart, mixed with the smell of car smoke. Children from another school ran past her, laughing, holding melting ice cream cones. Their faces were free, messy, alive. Myra closed her eyes for a second. For a heartbeat, she wished she was one of them. "Miss Myra," the driver called, opening the door for her. She quickly stepped inside, pushing the thought away. The car drove past narrow streets near Wall Street, where the noise was louder and the buildings were not polished towers but old brick shops. Myra leaned her head against the glass. That was when she saw it, a mechanic's shop with its door open. A boy not much older than her was working on a car. His clothes were dirty with grease, and his hands moved with calm confidence. He laughed at something an older man said, his voice carrying into the street. For some reason, Myra's eyes lingered. She had never seen someone look so free while working. It was the opposite of her world, where smiles had to be earned by winning or achieving. The driver noticed her gaze. "Do you want me to stop, miss?" She quickly shook her head. "No. Keep going." But inside, she felt a strange pull. That evening, she returned home to the wide, silent apartment. Her mother was still at the office. The walls echoed with emptiness. Myra placed her bag on the floor and walked into her room. She sat at her desk, books and notes spread out like an army waiting for battle. She tried to study, but the words blurred together. Numbers twisted. Her chest grew tight. Her hand trembled as she placed the pen down. Tears threatened to fall, but she bit her lip hard. Not now. Not again, she whispered. She walked to the window. Outside, the city pulsed with light and noise. She thought again of the mechanic's laugh, simple and honest. Something about it stayed with her. The sound of the front door opening startled her. Clara walked in, heels clicking against the floor. She placed her bag on the counter and glanced at Myra's books. Good. Keep working. You have an important future, Clara said, her tone flat as always. Yes, Mother, Myra replied softly. Her mother walked to her office room and closed the door. Myra stood frozen in the living room for a moment. She wanted to scream, to say she was tired, to say she couldn't breathe under all this weight. But her lips stayed closed. Later that night, Myra sat on her bed with the lights off. She hugged her knees to her chest, silent tears slipping down her face. Her heart pounded as if it wanted to break free. For the first time, she whispered into the darkness, "I'm breaking." Her voice was barely a breath, but it was real. And though no one heard it, it was the first crack in the wall she had built around herself. The world outside her window kept moving, cars passing, people shouting, life rushing forward. She did not know it yet, but soon her path would cross again with the mechanic she had seen. And when it did, nothing in her life would remain the same. The morning sun rose over the tall towers of the city, but Myra felt no warmth. Her body was heavy with exhaustion. She had barely slept. Numbers, words, and voices circled in her head all night. Her chest still ached, and her throat felt tight, but she forced herself out of bed. As always, Clara was already at the table, reading reports. Myra sat quietly and ate a slice of fruit. Neither of them said more than a few words. By the time she left for school, her stomach was already tight with worry. That day, everything felt harder than usual. In the first class, she forgot an answer when the teacher called her name. Everyone turned to look at her. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She gave an answer, but it was not perfect. The teacher frowned. In the second class, during a group project, her classmates pushed her to take the lead. "You're always the best at this," they said. Myra smiled faintly, but her hands shook as she wrote notes. By the time lunch came, her chest hurt so much it felt like she could not breathe. She sat alone, staring at her untouched food. After school, the driver waited for her near the gate. But Myra asked him to drop her off near her mother's office instead of home. She said she wanted to surprise Clara. The driver agreed and left her at the tall tower. People in suits rushed around the front doors. Myra stood there for a moment, looking up at the glass building that stretched toward the clouds. Her mother's empire. Her mother's kingdom. Her legs trembled as she stepped closer. She wanted to be strong, to show her mother she could handle this world. But as the noise of footsteps and voices filled her ears, her chest grew tighter. Her breath came faster. She pressed a hand against her ribs, trying to calm herself. But the more she tried, the harder it became. The world around her blurred. Someone bumped into her shoulder, muttering, "Watch it." The small push broke something inside her. Tears welled up. She sank down near the steps of the building, covering her face with her hands. The glass tower loomed above her, but all she could feel was the storm inside her chest. I can't do this, she whispered between broken breaths. People passed by, glancing at her, but no one stopped. To them, she was just another stranger crying in the street. But across the road, inside the open door of a mechanic's shop, someone noticed. It was the same boy Myra had seen before. His name was Daniel, though she did not know it yet. He had been tightening a bolt on a car engine when he looked up and saw her curled on the steps. Her neat uniform, her pale face, the way her shoulders shook, something about it pulled at him. "Hey," he said to the older man working beside him. "I'll be back in a minute." He wiped his hands quickly with a rag and walked across the street. The air was filled with the smell of gasoline and roasted nuts from a nearby vendor. When he reached Myra, he crouched down, keeping his voice gentle. "Hey, are you okay?" Myra shook her head, but she could not speak. Her breath was sharp and fast. Tears ran down her cheeks. "You can't breathe, right?" he asked softly. "Slow down. Look at me. Just look at me." Her watery eyes lifted to his. For a moment, she saw nothing but calm in his steady gaze. "Okay. Do this. Put your hand on your stomach," he said, placing his own hand on his stomach to show her. "Now breathe in slowly through your nose. Like this." He took a slow breath, exaggerating the movement so she could follow. Myra tried, her breath shaky, but she copied him. "Good," he said quietly. "Now breathe out through your mouth. Slow. Like you're blowing out a candle." She followed again, her shoulders trembling. After a few breaths, the storm in her chest began to ease just a little. Her tears still fell, but her breathing slowed. "That's it," Daniel said. "See? You're okay. Just breathe." Myra stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not with orders, not with pressure, but with patience. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't need to be sorry," Daniel said simply. "You're human." His words sank deep into her heart. Human. No one had ever allowed her to just be that. For the first time in her life, Myra felt that someone truly saw her not as the Ice Queen's daughter, not as a perfect student, but as a girl who was breaking. Behind them, the tall tower stood in silence. But in front of her, for the first time, was a boy who showed her another way to breathe. Myra looked at him, her chest still unsteady but lighter than before. She did not know why, but something inside her whispered that this meeting was only the beginning. The city noise carried on as if nothing had happened, but for Myra, the world felt different. She sat on the stone steps of the tall building, her cheeks still wet with tears. Beside her, Daniel sat calmly, not rushing her, not questioning her. Myra wiped her face again and whispered, "Thank you, for helping me." Daniel shrugged lightly. "It's nothing. You just forgot how to breathe for a moment. Happens to more people than you'd think." Myra looked at him, surprised. "You've seen this before?" He nodded. "Yeah. My younger sister used to panic like that when she was little. Everyone thought something was wrong with her heart, but the doctor said it was just fear and pressure. I learned to help her breathe again." His words eased something inside her. He spoke casually, without judgment. To him, she wasn't strange. She wasn't weak. She was just human. For a moment, neither of them spoke. People passed by, rushing into the building, but Myra felt as though time had slowed. She studied Daniel quietly. His dark hair was messy, his shirt was smudged with oil, and his hands had small cuts on the knuckles. He was nothing like the polished people her mother surrounded herself with. And yet, his presence felt warmer than anyone she had ever known. Daniel finally stood up and offered her his hand. "Come on. You shouldn't sit out here like this. People are staring." Myra hesitated before placing her hand in his. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped her up. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Not far," she said quickly. I can go by myself." Daniel didn't push. He only nodded. "All right. But before you go, remember this: when you feel like you can't breathe, put your hand on your stomach and slow down. In, out, steady. Don't fight it. Just guide it." Myra repeated his words in her mind, trying to memorize them. She nodded once, unable to say more. "Good," Daniel said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Take care of yourself." Then he walked back across the street, disappearing into the open garage. Myra stood frozen for a while, her heart strangely light. She had never met anyone like him before. That evening, when she returned home, the apartment felt colder than usual. Her mother was not there yet. The silence pressed against her ears, and for the first time, Myra didn't sit down to study. She walked to the window and whispered the words Daniel had taught her. In, out, steady. Her breath slowed, her chest loosening little by little. She closed her eyes and almost smiled. The next few days, Myra could not stop thinking about him. In school, while teachers lectured, she caught herself remembering his calm voice. While walking down the hallways, she thought of his steady eyes that didn't judge her. At night, when she couldn't sleep, she practiced the breathing he had shown her. It helped more than anything else ever had. One afternoon, instead of going straight home, Myra asked the driver to drop her near the small street she had seen before. She told him she wanted to walk for a while. The car pulled away, and Myra found herself standing in front of the mechanic's shop. The sound of tools clinking and the smell of oil filled the air. Daniel was there, bent over the hood of a car, humming softly to himself. Myra hesitated. She wasn't sure why she had come. But before she could turn away, Daniel noticed her. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey. You again." Myra felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just happened to pass by." Daniel smiled faintly. "Sure you did." He set the rag aside and walked over. "So? How's the breathing?" Myra looked down at her shoes. "Better. I tried what you told me. It works." "That's good." His smile widened, but it wasn't the kind of smile that mocked. It was simple, real. "See? Not so hard." Myra shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to say next. She wasn't used to conversations that didn't revolve around school or success. Finally, she asked, "Why are you so calm?" Daniel laughed softly. "Because I don't have time to be anything else. Cars break down. People need them fixed. Getting angry doesn't fix the engine. Breathing does." His answer sounded simple, but to Myra, it was almost like hearing another language. For the first time, she stayed a little longer. She watched him work, the way his hands moved with confidence and patience. She listened to the easy way he spoke, not rushing, not cold. It was so different from the world she knew. When she finally left, she carried something new inside her. It wasn't joy exactly, but it was lighter than the weight she always carried. That night, Clara noticed her daughter seemed quieter than usual at dinner. "Did you study enough?" she asked sharply. "Yes," Myra answered, but her mind was far away in a small garage filled with the smell of oil, where someone had taught her how to breathe. The following week, Myra's steps began to change. Every day after school, instead of going directly home, she found herself walking toward the small street where the mechanic's shop stood. She told the driver she wanted to walk alone, and though he looked surprised, he never questioned her. The shop was always the same: open doors, scattered tools, the hum of engines being repaired. And Daniel was always there, sleeves rolled up, face smudged with grease, working with a focus that Myra quietly admired. At first, she only stood near the edge, watching from a distance. She wasn't sure if she belonged in a place like that. The smell of oil clung to her clothes, and the sound of clanging tools echoed against her ears. But Daniel noticed her every time. "Back again?" he would ask with a teasing smile. Myra would nod shyly, pretending she just happened to pass by. But after the third visit, she stopped pretending. She admitted softly, "I came to see how you fix things." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Cars, you mean?" "Yes," she replied, though deep inside she knew it wasn't just cars. She wanted to see how he fixed things without fear, how his hands moved with patience, how his voice carried calm instead of pressure. And so, their secret meetings began. Daniel showed her little things at first. "This is a wrench," he said, holding it up. "You use it when you need to tighten or loosen bolts. Want to try?" Myra hesitated, but she took the wrench in her hands. It was heavier than she expected. Daniel guided her, pointing to a small part of the car. "Here. Turn it slowly." She tried, her movements awkward. Daniel chuckled softly but didn't mock her. "Not bad for your first try." For Myra, it felt strange. No one had ever praised her for something so small. Her entire life, she was only praised for perfect scores or flawless performances. But here, even the smallest effort was enough. Day by day, Myra spent more time at the shop. She listened as Daniel explained engines, wires, and wheels. She asked questions, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. He answered with patience, never rushing her. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. She would sit on a small stool in the corner while he worked, just watching. The sound of tools, the rhythm of his movements, it all felt like music she had never heard before. One afternoon, Daniel handed her a cloth. "Here. Help me clean this part." Myra blinked. "Me? Why not? You're here, aren't you?" She laughed nervously but took the cloth. Her soft hands grew dirty, black smudges covering her fingers. At first, she frowned at the mess. But then, as she wiped the grease away, she felt something surprising: relief. For once, it didn't matter if her hands were perfect. Daniel noticed the small smile on her face. "See? Not so bad." She looked at him and said quietly, "It feels real." That night, Myra returned home later than usual. Clara was waiting in the living room, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Where were you?" she asked. "I walked," Myra answered carefully. "I just needed some air." Clara studied her daughter for a long moment before nodding. "Don't waste time. You have exams coming." "Yes, mother," Myra replied, but her mind was far away in the garage where her hands were dirty, and her heart felt light. As the days passed, Myra's secret visits became her escape. She began to notice small things about Daniel. He always wiped his hands on the same old rag. He always laughed when his radio played a silly song. He always offered water to strangers who came by. He lived simply, but in that simplicity, Myra found something she had never known: peace. One afternoon, while Myra sat on the stool, Daniel leaned against the car and looked at her curiously. "Why do you keep coming here?" Myra hesitated. Her voice was soft when she answered. "Because here I can breathe." Daniel didn't push her for more. He only nodded, as if he understood. For Myra, those words were truer than anything she had ever said. In the world of tall towers and cold eyes, she felt trapped. But in this small garage, surrounded by grease and tools, she felt alive. Her secret was safe, at least for now. But deep inside, Myra knew secrets could not stay hidden forever. Still, she clung to those moments, those breaths, those smiles that came without effort. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was beginning to live. For weeks, Myra's life moved in two different worlds. By day, she was the perfect daughter of the Ice Queen: neat uniform, sharp scores, polite silence. But in the late afternoons, she escaped to the small garage, where laughter mixed with the sound of tools, and her hands grew dirty without fear. She had learned how to clean an engine filter, how to change a tire, and even how to listen to the rhythm of an engine to know if it was healthy. Daniel always said, "Engines are like people. They breathe too. You just have to listen." Every time Myra repeated the breathing exercise he had taught her, she felt steadier. The storms inside her chest didn't vanish completely, but they no longer drowned her. But secrets rarely stay hidden. One Thursday evening, Myra returned home later than usual. Her shirt had faint grease marks on the sleeves, and her hands smelled faintly of oil. She washed them quickly in the bathroom before dinner, but she didn't notice that a black streak remained near her wrist. Clara did. At the table, Clara's sharp eyes flicked to her daughter's arm. "What is that?" she asked. Myra froze. "What?" Clara reached across and caught Myra's wrist, turning it slightly. The black smudge stood out against her pale skin. "Grease," Clara said coldly. "Why would you have grease on your arm?" Myra's heart pounded. For a moment, she thought about lying. But the words refused to form. I go to a garage sometimes," she whispered. Clara's hand tightened around her wrist. "A garage?" Her voice rose, slicing the silence of the room. "Do you know who you are? Do you know what people will say if they see you like that?" Myra pulled her wrist back, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to learn something different." "Different?" Clara's laugh was sharp, almost bitter. "You have the best school, the best tutors, the future people dream about. And you waste time in a dirty garage." Tears burned in Myra's eyes, but she forced herself to speak. "It's not a waste. I feel free there." The word hung in the air like thunder. Clara's face hardened. "Free? You think freedom comes from turning bolts like some street boy? Freedom comes from power, from success, from respect. Everything I built, everything I've given you, it's so you can stand above the rest, not crawl on the ground with oil on your hands." Myra's chest tightened, but she did not back down. "Maybe I don't want to stand above everyone. Maybe I just want to breathe." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Clara's eyes blazed, but her voice was low when she spoke again. "Who is he?" Myra's lips parted in shock. "What?" "The boy," Clara said sharply. "There must be a boy. No daughter of mine sneaks into garages for fun." Myra's cheeks flushed. She looked down, unable to answer. That silence was enough. Clara's voice turned cold as ice. "You will never see him again." Myra's heart dropped. "Mother, please, enough." Clara's palm struck the table, making the glasses shake. "From tomorrow, you will come home straight after school. No excuses. No detours. If I have to, I will arrange for someone to follow you." Tears slipped down Myra's cheeks. Her hands shook as she whispered, "You don't understand me." Clara leaned closer, her face inches away. "I don't need to understand you. I need to shape you. You are my daughter. And you will not throw away everything for some foolish dream." The words cut deep, sharper than any blade. That night, Myra lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her chest rose and fell too fast. She pressed her hands against it, whispering Daniel's words. "In, out, steady." The tears did not stop, but her breath slowed little by little. Still, her heart ached with the truth she could no longer hide from herself: her mother would never allow her to live the way she wanted. The next day, Clara sent the driver to pick her up directly from school. Myra sat in the back seat, silent, her eyes fixed on the window. The car passed the familiar street where the garage stood. She saw Daniel for just a second, his sleeves rolled up, a wrench in hand, laughing with someone. Her chest squeezed painfully. She wanted to shout, to tell the driver to stop, to run across the street. But she stayed frozen. When the car turned away, Myra pressed her forehead against the glass. A single thought burned inside her. How long can I live like this? The Ice Queen's daughter was breaking, but this time she was not sure if breathing exercises could hold her together. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of the apartment, but Myra felt no warmth. Her chest still ached from yesterday's argument with her mother. The words, cold and sharp, echoed in her mind. "You will not throw away everything for some foolish dream." Myra sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. The soft bracelets Daniel had once joked about were gone. She didn't dare wear them anymore. For the first time, she felt trapped in her own life, divided between two worlds: the world of power and expectation her mother demanded, and the world of freedom and understanding she had discovered in the garage. Her school bag lay packed on the floor. Today, she was supposed to attend a meeting with her mother's business associates. Everyone expected her to speak politely, smile, and impress. And yet, Myra could not stop thinking about Daniel. She remembered his calm voice, his gentle guidance, the way he had taught her to breathe when everything inside her was storming. For hours, she stared at the ceiling, hands pressed against her chest, repeating the words he had taught her. In, out, steady. Finally, Myra made a decision. She would not live her life only for someone else's expectations. She would not let fear and pressure decide her happiness. She stood, took a deep breath, and walked to her closet. She didn't pick the dress her mother had carefully chosen for her. Instead, she put on a simple shirt and jeans, clothes she felt comfortable in, free in. The driver waited outside, confused when she came down the stairs. "Where to, miss?" he asked. "Somewhere else," Myra replied softly, her voice steady. She didn't tell him where she was going. She didn't want to. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear, but it was a different kind of fear, the fear of stepping into her own life. When she reached the familiar street, her heart leapt. The garage door was open, and the smell of oil and metal greeted her like a strange, warm friend. Daniel was there, working on a car. When he looked up and saw her, his face broke into a small, surprised smile. "Myra?" he asked softly. She smiled, the first true smile she had felt in weeks. "Hi. I needed to come here." Daniel wiped his hands and walked toward her. "You're here. That's good. Everything okay?" Myra shook her head. "No. Everything's not okay. But I realized something. I can't live trapped anymore. I need to learn to breathe, and live my way." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she had expected. "Then start now. Right here. Right away." She took a deep breath, placing her hand on her stomach as he had taught her. In, out, steady. Her chest felt lighter, the storm inside her easing slightly. For the first time, she felt in control of herself. They spent the afternoon together, working on a small engine Daniel had promised to teach her. Myra laughed when she made a mistake, and Daniel laughed with her, not at her. She learned, she breathed, she lived in ways she had never imagined possible. Later, when the sun began to set, painting the city in warm oranges and soft pinks, Myra stood outside the garage. She looked at the tall towers in the distance, her mother's world of power and control. It was tempting, it was familiar, but it no longer called to her. "I have to go back home," she said quietly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yes," she replied firmly. "But not to stay trapped. I need to face my mother, and tell her I'm choosing my own way." That evening, Myra returned to the apartment. Clara was waiting, as if she had known something would happen. Her eyes were sharp, her expression cold. "Where have you been?" Clara asked. "I've been learning," Myra said, holding her head high. "Learning that I can't live only for other people. I need to breathe, Mother. I need to live for myself too." Clara's face softened for a moment, but her eyes stayed wary. "You think life is only about freedom? You think you can ignore responsibility?" Myra shook her head. "No, I know life is about responsibility. But it's also about being real, about being able to feel and live without fear. I've learned that. And I won't hide from it anymore." Her mother studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Clara said, "Then, you must learn to face both. Your world and mine. And perhaps, someday, you will understand balance." Myra nodded. It was not a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. She felt lighter, freer, and stronger than she ever had. That night, she returned to her room and placed her hand on her chest. She breathed in, slow and steady, just as Daniel had taught her. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift. She smiled, knowing that she had made her choice not for power, not for approval, but for herself. And for the first time in her life, Myra breathed freely.